Technology is the future, Martin declared, raising his champagne flute at my farewell luncheon in the Houston headquarters. His perfectly rehearsed smile never touched his eyes. With our new AI-powered systems, Halcyon Uniform Group will lead the industry for decades to come. He turned toward me with that polished sincerity they teach in executive coaching boot camps. Let's give Elise a round of applause for getting us here. The room burst into forced clapping. I smiled politely, nodding, clutching the small leather-bound planner I'd carried for nearly 2 decades. It was the only personal item I took with me after boxing up 22 years of service into 3 nondescript moving boxes the day before. My name is Elise Morgan. I'm 62 years old. For over 2 decades, I built, maintained, and modernized Halcyon's entire data infrastructure, from physical servers in our earliest Texas warehouse to the cloud-based distribution logic used across 6 states. Back then, they didn't call me a systems architect. I was the IT gal, the woman who made things run when they weren't supposed to. Elise has been with us since the early days. Martin continued projecting enthusiasm. He had joined the company just 11 months earlier. She's watched Halcyon grow from a regional supplier into one of the largest uniform distributors in North America. And today, we send her off with deep gratitude and our very best wishes for retirement. Retirement. The word scraped like sandpaper. I wasn't retiring. I was being removed. The decision had been finalized 3 weeks earlier, right after the board voted to implement an AI-based management platform they bought for $21 million. The Zenith system will streamline our logistics and eliminate inefficiencies, Martin had told me as he reclined in his ergonomic chair. Your role is unfortunately redundant under this new model. Now, at my so-called farewell lunch, people I'd worked beside for years avoided my eyes. They knew this wasn't a celebration. It was a quiet burial, a symbolic deletion of an aging asset. Over the years, I had engineered everything from inventory automation and order tracking to emergency override systems during power outages. I wrote the first protocols that kept our warehouses running 24/7. I designed integrations that our custom tools still relied on. But I didn't look like the future. I looked like experience. And experience in Martin's world was no longer welcome. I felt the weight of the planner in my hands. It held handwritten notes, troubleshooting logic, undocumented quirks of our legacy systems, and backup routines no AI could replicate. Data not stored on any cloud. Knowledge not indexed in any software. Only in my mind and these pages. To Elise, Martin concluded, and to the future of Halcyon Uniform Group. I raised my glass, my face calm. My heart steady. They thought they were sending me off. What they didn't know was they'd just thrown out the only map they had. And they were headed straight for the storm. Little did they know their future was about to get very complicated. I bought my house in the Heights neighborhood of Houston back in 2001 when Halcyon Uniform Group was still called Lone Star Textiles and operated out of a rented cinderblock building with 18 employees and no HR department. Now, the company boasted over 6,500 staff nationwide, and that modest 2-bedroom bungalow of mine had quadrupled in value. If I wanted, I could sell it tomorrow and retire with comfort. But retirement wasn't in my plans. The evening after my retirement lunch, I sat on my screened-in porch with a glass of Cabernet, the Texas dusk stretching purple across the sky, and thought about how I'd become the company's invisible backbone. When Robert Keller hired me in '01, fresh from finishing my late-night computer science degree while raising 2 kids, he took a chance no one else would. You're calm when the room isn't. He once told me, you don't panic, you plan. And I did. As Lone Star became Halcyon, I anticipated our growing pains before they happened. I engineered redundancies into our core systems, created contingency protocols for natural disasters, standardized data input when we transitioned from handwritten invoices to full cloud logistics. Whenever we acquired smaller regional suppliers, it was my job to absorb and integrate their inventory and billing systems. I learned to listen before changing anything, preserve what worked, Upgrade what didn't. All of that changed 3 years ago when Robert retired and the board brought in Martin Clay. 38 years old MBA from Stanford LinkedIn, full of tech jargon and startup buzz, zero understanding of industrial apparel. He made a show of leading through disruption. But all I saw was a man trying to impress shareholders with flashy systems he didn't understand. His first meeting said it all. We must disrupt ourselves before Amazon does. Soon we were crawling with consultants from Everlane & Co. They loved phrases like digital convergence and predictive fulfillment. They spent weeks interviewing me, mining my institutional memory, diagramming my systems like explorers mapping an ancient temple. I should have recognized the pattern, but I stayed loyal, thinking my experience mattered. The doorbell jolted me from those thoughts. Through the peephole, Hannah from HR holding a basket of fruit and 2 bottles of sparkling water. "Just wanted to check in," she said as I opened the door. "The transition team realized they're missing some of your authentication codes." The transition team, 3 recent grads with matching laptops and no real experience, had been tasked with replacing my life's work. "It's all in the handover packet," I said. "The master list includes access protocols." Hannah's smile flickered. "They're having trouble with the warehouse automation. Some confusion about the legacy code." Of course they were. Those interfaces were custom-coded, over 15 years patched and tuned to work with our older robotics. Nothing about them was plug-and-play. I accepted the basket, but didn't invite her in. "If this story moved, you go ahead and hit that subscribe button because the next one, it might just be the moment you've been waiting for." "I'm sure they'll figure it out," I said. The Zenith system is the future, after all. 1 week later, the first signs of trouble emerged. A text from my former colleague, Jamie Systems, glitching. "Warehouse sync failing. People are freaking out." I just sipped my wine and let the sunset do the talking. The new team couldn't figure out why the inventory wouldn't reconcile with the shipping manifests. Jamie's text sounded panicked, but I didn't respond. The next morning, I got a call from Becky in accounting. "Elise, we're having trouble with the quarterly reporting module. The numbers aren't lining up with the sales data." I stayed neutral. "I'm sure the transition team can handle it. But the Zenith system still pulls from your database structure," she said gently. "No one understands the connections like you do." I felt a small tug of sympathy. Becky had always been kind. She once brought me homemade soup when I was out with the flu. But I stayed firm. "I've moved on, Becky. My consulting schedule is full," and that was no exaggeration. The day after my final paycheck cleared, I'd received a call from Raymond Cole, co-founder of Sunridge Supply Chain, Halcyon's biggest competitor in the southern region. "Just an informal consultation," he'd said. "We've followed your work for years." Their offices sat on the 18th floor of a glass and steel tower near downtown Houston, with sweeping views of Buffalo Bayou. It felt like stepping into the future. Open layout smart boards in every room. Sunlight pouring across modern, minimalist furniture. A far cry from Halcyon's dimly lit main campus, where the break room microwave had been older than my car. Raymond greeted me personally in the lobby, a courtesy Martin Clay had never extended in 22 years. "Ms. Morgan," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "Thank you for coming. We're eager to hear your thoughts on our infrastructure." That meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. They walked me through their platforms, introduced me to their lead engineers, and asked smart, direct questions. They listened, really listened. When they described their persistent issue-syncing inventory across their 6 facilities, I already knew the answer. "I built the solution to that problem 15 years ago," I said quietly. At the end of the meeting, Raymond walked me to the elevators. "We'd like to bring you on as a consultant," he said. 3 days a week, full autonomy, your own team. We trust your instincts." The offer was generous, twice what I had been making at Halcyon, with the freedom to design without interference. "I'll think about it," I told him. But I already knew. When I got home that evening, I saw 3 missed calls on my phone, 1 from Hannah in HR, 1 from someone in IT, and 1 from Martin himself. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I poured a fresh cup of coffee, opened my old leather-bound planner, and began typing its contents into an encrypted file on my laptop. Emergency protocols, server-level shortcuts, system dependencies that even the AI didn't understand, knowledge that lived only in my head and those worn-out pages. The next morning, I called Raymond and accepted his offer. That afternoon, Jamie texted again. Total crash. Nothing syncing. Shipping and sales are completely out of step. Martin is flipping out. I didn't reply. I just shut my phone, sipped my coffee, and looked out the window at a future I was finally designing on my terms. That afternoon, Jamie texted again. Complete system failure. Nothing's talking to anything. CEO's losing it. I silenced my phone without replying and finished packing for my first day at Sunridge Supply Chain. By my third week there, the real storm had hit. I'd been given a corner office on the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Houston and Buffalo Bayou. More importantly, I had a team 5 sharp developers who listened when I spoke about legacy architecture, who took notes, asked questions, and didn't treat me like a relic. We were already making progress, rebuilding Sunridge's inventory management platform. In just 3 weeks, I felt more respected, more seen than I had during my last 3 years at Halcyon. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jamie. They're calling it the Black Thursday crash. Orders lost, warehouse frozen, customer portal dead. Martin's looking for someone to blame. I didn't reply, but I did open up the Houston Business Chronicle. There it was, front page just below the fold, Halcyon Uniform Group faces major system, meltdown stock drops, 8% amid fulfillment crisis. The article outlined how Halcyon's newly implemented Zenith AI system had failed catastrophically. Customers couldn't place orders, warehouses were frozen, and customer service couldn't even retrieve historical data. The company had issued a vague statement about temporary technical issues, but internal sources, Jamie no doubt, were describing it as a total collapse. My office phone rang. Raymond Cole's name flashed on the screen. "I assume you've seen the news about your former employer?" he asked. "I just finished reading it." He paused. "Any insights you'd care to share?" I hesitated for a moment, then answered carefully. Their new system was rolled out without understanding the structure it was replacing. No sandbox testing, no transition staging, no modular backups. They replaced a living system with a black box. This was inevitable. I see. Another pause. "We received a call this morning from someone named Charles Beringer. He's on Halcyon's board. Said you used to work closely with him." My heart jumped. Charles had been the only board member who ever bothered to ask how our systems worked back when Robert Keller was still CEO. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That we're very satisfied with our current team and have no plans to share our consultants." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you." Raymond continued, a hint of curiosity in his tone. "Just how bad do you think their situation is?" I exhaled slowly, torn between professional objectivity and long-buried resentment. If they attempted to integrate Zenith without properly migrating the manufacturing execution layers I built, they've likely corrupted their entire operational database. Order flows, warehouse logic, and audit logs could all be out of sync. And recovery. Not possible with their current team, I said plainly. They don't know the infrastructure. And frankly, they never cared to. There was a silence on the line before Raymond said, "Well, I think we're lucky to have you here." For the first time in a long while, I believe that too. Every order inventory record and shipping manifest from the last 3 months could be compromised, and recovery technically possible, but not with the people they had on staff. They didn't understand how the legacy systems I built interacted with the AI layers they'd slapped on top. Before I could elaborate, my assistant appeared in the doorway looking flustered. "Elise, there's a Martin Clay on line 2. He's called 3 times in the last hour." I nodded. "Thank you." But I didn't move. Across the room, Raymond Cole, our co-founder and my current boss, raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you going to take that 'I don't work for Halcyon' anymore?" I said simply. He smiled faintly. "No, you certainly don't." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Don't forget we've got that strategy session at 3. I'd love your perspective on expanding our direct-to-customer fulfillment stream." When he left, I stared at the blinking light on my desk phone for a long moment, then turned back to my screen. By that evening, my inbox was flooded with increasingly frantic emails from Halcyon executives. The most revealing came from Hannah in HR. The transition team has admitted they can't restore from your backup protocols. Martin's talking about bringing in outside consultants $30,000 a day. Please, Elise, can we talk? I closed my laptop and went home. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, the financial news made things worse for them. Halcyon stock had taken another 6% hit overnight. A local analyst on Channel 5 Business Briefing speculated that ongoing fulfillment disruptions could cost the company $50 to $60 million, not to mention long-term reputational damage they might never recover from. When I arrived at Sunridge's office, there was a large fruit basket waiting on my desk with a handwritten card from Raymond. Thank you for your loyalty. Your insights helped us land the Whitman account 4.2 annually. The Whitman Group had been one of Halcyon's oldest, most loyal clients. I allowed myself a quiet smile before turning back to work. At noon, my desk phone rang again. Elise, the receptionist, said cautiously, "There's a Martin Clay in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he insists on seeing you." I sighed. "Tell him I'm in meetings all day." He says he'll wait. After a quick check-in with Raymond, who looked more amused than concerned, I agreed to a brief 15-minute meeting in a neutral conference room on the first floor. Martin looked nothing like the smooth-talking CEO I remembered. His suit was wrinkled eyes, bloodshot, a coffee stain, visible on his shirt collar. He reached out a shaky hand. "Elise," he said, "thank you for seeing me." I nodded, but didn't take his hand. "What can I do for you, Martin?" I asked, keeping my tone professional. I didn't let the satisfaction show, though it was there just under the surface. He looked like a man undone, and I was just getting started. "We need your help," Martin said simply. "The Zenith integration has encountered some complications. I believe the business papers are calling it a catastrophic failure." He winced, adjusting the collar of his stained shirt. "The coverage has been unfortunate. But with your expertise, we believe we can resolve the issues quickly. The board has authorized me to offer you a 6-month consulting contract. Very generous terms." "I have a position here," I replied flatly. "We'll double whatever they're paying you," he blurted. Then, seeing I wasn't moved, "triple it." I leaned back in my chair and studied him. "You fired me, Martin," I said. "You called my experience outdated. What was it you said? Technology is the future? And my methods were holding the company back." To his credit, he looked genuinely ashamed. "That was a mistake. We all make mistakes. Some I cut in are more expensive than others. Elise, please. We're losing millions every day. The warehouses can't ship. Customer service can't pull order histories. The Zenith team says the core database is corrupted beyond recovery." I thought of the detailed documentation I'd submitted, dismissed as too dense. The legacy system training sessions that had been skipped, the migration timelines they had accelerated against my advice. "No," I said simply. Martin blinked. "What? I don't work for Halcyon anymore. I have commitments here, but I'm sure your AI-first transition experts will figure it out. Eventually." Desperation cracked into frustration. "You know exactly what's gone wrong," he snapped. "You probably built in these failures." I stood slowly, my own temper rising. "I built systems that ran flawlessly for over 2 decades. If they're failing now, it's because you dismantled them without understanding what they were made of." "We'll sue," he barked, "for sabotage." I tilted my head, expression calm. "For what, Martin? For taking a job after being fired. For not spoon-feeding every undocumented workaround I invented across 22 years. For not picking up when you called, I began gathering my papers. Our 15 minutes are up." At the door, I paused. "Oh, by the way, the full recovery protocol is documented in the Emergency Procedures Manual, Volume 3, Section 8. I updated it quarterly for 20 years, but that would mean actually reading the documentation." His mouth opened slightly as if to argue, but no sound came out. I walked away. Back upstairs, I returned to my new office at Sunridge, where I was helping to build something smarter, stronger, and far more appreciated. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived at my home. Inside was a formal letter from Halcyon's legal department requesting all documents, notes, and intellectual property tied to my former role. It was followed by a personal note in different handwriting. Elise, call me. We need to talk. The board is in chaos. Charles Beringer. Charles had always respected the work. If anyone on that board understood the scale of what was unfolding, it was him. But I wasn't sure they deserved saving. Not yet. Out of respect for our history, I decided to respond to Charles Beringer. He picked up on the first ring. "This is a mess," he said without even saying hello. "Martin has the board convinced you sabotaged the system." I almost laughed. That's absurd. I built those systems to survive hurricanes, hardware failures, and server fires. They were solid, and they were working flawlessly when I left. I know that Charles said, his voice heavy, but the board needs someone to blame. And you're not here to defend yourself, I sighed. So what's really going on? The Zenith rollout has been a disaster. We've lost millions in missed orders, and during the migration, our main backup was corrupted. There's a tertiary backup, I said immediately. The secure node in Building 5. It runs independently and archives every Friday at midnight. There was a pause. Too long. Building 5 was decommissioned last month, Charles admitted. Cost-cutting measure. The hardware was dismantled. I closed my eyes. I could picture it, the small reinforced room I had personally overseen for a decade, now probably gutted, its drives gone to auction. Elise? Charles's voice softened. I know what they did to you was wrong, but there are over 6,000 people still working here. Warehouse workers, driver's service reps, people who had nothing to do with Martin's decisions. It was a fair point, one that had weighed on me more than I liked to admit. My anger wasn't aimed at them. It was aimed at the executives who had treated me like outdated code. I can't come back, Charles, I said. I've made commitments here at Sunridge. I understand, but maybe there's another way. What if you consulted remotely? Just enough to get us stabilized again. The board is willing to compensate you well. You won't have to deal with Martin at all. I didn't respond right away. That night, I brought the offer to Raymond Cole, expecting him to dismiss it out of hand. Instead, he surprised me. Help them, he said. But on our terms. You want me to help our biggest competitor? I want you to turn this situation into an opportunity. If you can get their systems functional again, and in return, we secure favorable terms for Sunridge. That's not charity. That's strategy. The next morning, I called Charles with my conditions. I'll do it, I said, but only as a remote consultant working directly with your technical team, no contact with Martin. I'll need a consulting fee paid up front. That's reasonable, Charles replied. And Halcyon must sign a strategic partnership with Sunridge Supply Chain, granting us preferred vendor status for regional distribution, at least until your systems are fully restored. Charles was quiet. That's essentially asking us to collaborate with our rival, he said. No, I corrected gently. It's asking you to face reality. Your network's down. Your clients are bailing. You need stability. We can provide that if we're at the table. After a long pause, Charles exhaled. I'll take it to the board. I already knew how it would go. They were out of options. And now, the leverage was mine. Sunridge can handle the overflow at fair rates, I told Charles, and I can help your team stabilize the systems. This isn't about favors. It's about survival. Charles brought my terms to Halcyon's board. It took them 8 hours in emergency session, but eventually they agreed. Martin Clay reportedly was livid, but overruled. The following week was intense. I worked entirely remote, guiding Halcyon's frazzled tech staff through video calls as they tried to recover corrupted systems and salvage inventory pipelines. I didn't give them everything, just enough to restore basic functionality, halt the bleeding, and stop the company from spiraling into collapse. Meanwhile, Raymond Cole was thrilled with the outcome of the partnership agreement. The access it gave us to Halcyon's displaced clients was something we'd been chasing for years. Halcyon's stock stabilized. The frantic media coverage began to slow. I kept my distance from Martin throughout the entire process, speaking only to the technical team and Charles. Still, I heard through Jamie that Martin's role was unraveling. Several board members had begun openly questioning his leadership. This wasn't revenge. This was something better. Vindication. About 6 weeks after what the Halcyon tech team had started calling the Morgan protocols, I received an email from Charles. Subject: Board meeting results. Martin Clay had been removed as CEO. The board vote was 9-3 in favor of his immediate dismissal. The Zenith failure cost us $142 million in lost revenue, broken client relationships, and emergency consulting, Charles wrote. When the quarterly report confirmed the full damage, his position became indefensible. I thought you should hear it from me first. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words wash over me. I hadn't tried to ruin Martin. I hadn't needed to. His own ego had done the job. Later that afternoon, Raymond stopped by my office, holding 2 coffees and wearing that familiar knowing smile. I hear Halcyon's shopping for a new CEO, he said. So I've heard, I replied. They could do worse than bringing Charles back in, at least for a while. I nodded. He understands the business. Martin never did. Raymond sipped his coffee, then added, speaking of understanding business, the Whitman account was so impressed with how we handled their overflow that they're asking about making the arrangement permanent. That's a $12 million annual contract, I said. And wasn't that one of Halcyon's legacy clients? Was Raymond replied with a shrug. Now it's ours. Business is business. He glanced at the wall clock. By the way, the executive committee meets tomorrow to start framing our 5-year strategic plan. Okay, I said, curious where he was going with this. I want you to present your vision for our data architecture, he said. You've transformed our operations in less than 2 months, Elise. They need to understand what you've built and what's possible. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose, respect, ownership. All right, I said, smiling. Let's show them what it looks like when experience leads innovation. Your work deserves recognition. Raymond's words echoed as he left my office, heading into the strategy meeting. I turned and looked out across the Houston skyline from my corner window. In the distance, I could still make out the rooftop of Halcyon's old distribution hub. Their logo still glowed on the side of the building, but inside everything had changed. The company would survive, but it would never be the same. Neither would I. For the first time in decades, I was building something on my terms, surrounded by people who respected my insight, not just tolerated my presence. 3 months later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Sunridge Supply Chain's new technology center. A plaque was mounted beside the glass entryway, gleaming in the Texas sun, Elise Morgan Technology Center. Where innovation meets experience, Raymond had insisted on naming it after me. My complete overhaul of Sunridge's systems had led to a 38% improvement in logistics efficiency across their regional operations. That center would now house our expanded development team and serve as a hands-on training hub for engineers and systems architects from across the company. During his remarks, Raymond said, "We didn't just hire a consultant. We gained a visionary, someone who reminded us that technology is meant to empower people, not erase them." As I stood beside him for the ceremonial photo, smiling politely for the cameras, I thought about how wildly things had changed since the day I packed up my desk at Halcyon. I hadn't set out for revenge. I just wanted a clean start to build something that mattered. But that success had become a kind of justice, all its own quiet, powerful earned. The reception that followed was filled with local business leaders, city officials, and reporters. As I was finishing a glass of sparkling water near the catering table, a poised woman in a navy suit approached me. Elise Morgan. Yes, I'm Diane Torres, with the Governor's Office of Business Development. I've been hearing incredible things about your work here. We spoke for nearly 30 minutes about systems, infrastructure, public-private partnerships, and the future of scalable logistics in the Gulf region. At the end, she handed me her card. We're forming a task force on technology infrastructure for Texas state agencies. We're looking for people with both expertise and real-world perspective. Would you be interested in serving as an advisor? 6 months ago, I'd been labeled obsolete by a CEO who thought AI could replace judgment. Now I was being asked to help shape policy for an entire state. I'd be honored, I said, accepting her card. As the reception wound down and people filtered into the night, I checked my phone. A new message from Jamie, new CEO, finally announced, "You'll never guess. Charles Beringer. He's back." I smiled and slipped the phone into my purse. That chapter had officially closed. My focus now, building the future. As I looked around the bustling center, bearing my name filled with energy, curiosity, and respect, I realized something profound. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. If my story spoke to you, even just a little, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what part hit home, or share your own story of being overlooked, underestimated, or replaced. Because here's the truth. I've learned being pushed out doesn't mean you're finished. Sometimes it's the beginning of your most powerful chapter. I wasn't some corporate prodigy. I was a woman who showed up year after year, who built systems no one bothered to understand until they fell apart without me. So many of us, especially as we get older, are told our value has an expiration date. That if we're not flashy young or talking in buzzwords, we're outdated. But experience, integrity, and consistency aren't trends. They're anchors. If you're facing a setback, maybe you've been passed over, forced out, or made to feel like your time has passed, I hope my story reminds you your worth is not defined by people who fail to see it. Find your people, find your purpose, and build something no one else can take away from you. That's where the real power lives. If you want to see more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, second chances, and justice served without a single raised voice, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Support the stories of women like me who didn't burn it all down. We just built something better, and we're not done yet. Thank you for listening. I'm Elise Morgan, and I'm just getting started.